Hi, it's been about 5 years since I've done a presentation of any kind. Some of you know me from the Bridgewater Visitor Center. I enjoyed working there and gave probably thousands of lectures on dinosaurs, but I've never talked on this subject before. So part of this I'll probably read and then I'll wing it on a few. Some of you know a little bit about Peg Leg Smith. His name was Thomas Long Smith, called Peg Leg Smith. He was born in 1801 in Crab Orchard, Kentucky, and he died in 1866 in San Francisco. He ran away from home in his teens. He worked on a flatboat in Mississippi. He worked for John Jacob Astor as a trapper and with Kit Carson and Jim Bridger. He became a scout on Alexandra LeGrand's expedition, learned several Native American languages. He was shot in the knee by a local Indian, amputated his own right leg and fashioned a wooden leg, and occasionally took it off to defend himself in fights. He was a mountain man who traveled the old Spanish Trail for various reasons, not all of them legal. With the decline of the fur trade in the 1840s, he began kidnapping and selling Native American children to use as laborers in Mexico. He also was a major horse thief with Jim Beckworth, Bill Williams. He started a group of horse thieves, including Walt Hara, the Indian horse thief, and his band of 150 youths to steal horses from Mexican ranchers and take them across the Sierra Nevada to other places. His travels took him on the old Spanish Trail for much of this. And if you know Southern California much, he used to spawn with various things through the Coachella Valley, which is the San Gorgonio Pass from Los Angeles, and Highway 10 goes right to Phoenix, past that whole area. He died in 1866 at the age of 65, and if you look him up, it says on Google, usually it'll say Peg Leg Smith Explorer. The West is full of gold mine legends, so this is just going to be more lies. Speculators have been searching for Peg Leg's gold for a long time because he used to gamble in Los Angeles, and occasionally he would gamble with nuggets. These nuggets were very strange. They were black nuggets. They didn't look like gold, but if you took a knife and scratched them, they were gold. And so people used to follow him around to try and find out what the source of this was, because he seemed to have an unlimited supply of gold. The Santa Rosa Mountains were just south. In fact, I lived in the foothills of the Santa Rosa Mountains in Palm Desert, California. And that whole area was part of that trail that many people took from Los Angeles into other areas of the Southwest, including the Phoenix area. As you go through there, on the south side is Ocotillo Wells and Borrego Springs. And since 1905, there's now the Salton Sea, which was a mistake. Salton Sea was an engineering error. It's still there, and by the way, some of you may know that they have just found amazing deposits of the stuff that's in lithium. Lithium. And that appears to be one of the biggest lithium areas in the world. We haven't developed it yet, but it looks good. I'm going to tell you how I learned first about Peg Leg's black gold. I first heard about Peg Leg Smith and his lost gold mine while playing poker with a group of characters at a friend's house. off Highway 74 in the Santa Rosa Mountains on Pines Highway that goes to goes up to Idlewild. And I lived in that valley for about 30 years, and this little group of businessmen would go up to the top of that mountain to somebody's house, and we would have these illegal poker games. So the people who were at those games were a really interesting group of people. The fellow who owned the house up on that mountain was George Service. He was a close relative to the famous British-Canadian poet who wrote The Cremation of Sam McGee, Robert Service. George ran a tour guide business that took people to places like Death Valley and Cerro Gordo, and I became the naturalist. I was doing archaeology at that time, not paleontology, which I've done here. So we would go up there and play cards, and in that group was William F. Cody, IV, who was the descendant of Buffalo Bill Cody, who was a fairly well-known Southern California architect who did many of the best American modern buildings in Palm Springs, including the spa, if you've been there, and so forth. And Bill was that woodsy kind of guy, and we went on several trips together. And rounding out this little band of gamblers was Jack Pepper. Anybody know Jack Pepper? Know who he was? In 1937, Randall Henderson started Desert Magazine in Palm Desert, California. And Jack Pepper bought it from him in 1965. He and Coral Pepper, who were again well known because he had been an editor. He'd been actually a combat journalist in World War II in Tarawa, the Battle of Tarawa. He was a combat journalist there, and that was a terrible battle. The Japanese said 1 million men cannot take Tarawa in 100 years. It took the Marines 76 hours, but in that they had 1,000 dead and 2,000 wounded to take that. Jack managed a sad smile later when he told me that the military paper that he'd started after that battle was called Tarawa Boontie. Great sense of humor, even in that grisly time. It happened also that the other person in that group was my business partner, Roger Dean. We were commercial artists, a two-man commercial art shop in Palm Desert. And Roger and I did paste up for Jack at Desert Magazine when he bought it. So I was almost always listed as cartographer for Desert Magazine, but I did all kinds of things. Paste up, design, I wrote occasional articles. We occasionally had other players that would come into our game and that. But Jack used to tell stories in between our losing money. I many times went home almost without my shirt or pants. Occasionally would win because I was the worst poker player you ever saw. So Jack and his wife Coral used to go on many trips to Baja California, and they were close friends with Earl Stanley Gardner. You know who he was? Pyrenees, right? He wrote, at one time, he had the world's record for the most books ever written by one man in the world. Well, Earl Stanley Gardner and them used to go on all of these trips. Jack used to tell stories about Merle Stanley Gardner and all the things that they found, the caves in Baja California and so forth. But then he told us a story. I'm going to do this here a second. He told us a story about these. And at the Desert Magazine office, there was a case. And in that case, there were 7 gold nuggets. And one of them was jet black. The rest of them had been cleaned. In 1965, right after he bought the Desert magazine, a small package and a letter appeared at Desert magazine office. It was heavy for its size. Jack read the letter, which was quite lengthy, followed by a frenzied opening of the package. And inside that package was a letter, a story, and 2 gold nuggets. Those 2 gold nuggets right here. Now, unlike other stories about gold, I held these in my hand. So that's all I know about it. I held them in my hand. I don't know if the stories about them were true or not, but it was certainly published. The letter that accompanied these gold nuggets was, although the enclosed story has no byline, I believe it and the photographs will be of interest to you. After you've read the story, you will understand why the reasons for my remaining anonymous are too obvious to enumerate. You have my full permission to publish the story in this letter if you wish. They may be of minor interest to the readers of Desert magazine. More important, I am enclosing 2 of Peg Leg's nuggets. One is still black, exactly as found. The other has had the black copper oxides removed by the process mentioned in the story and is now native gold in color. You will have these nuggets to show one and all who have doubted the story of Peg Leg's black nuggets. You may keep them with my compliments for Desert magazine's collection of desert artifacts. In this case, you can start a new collection of items from the lost mines that have been found. So, for 100 years, people have been looking for this gold, and this man claimed that he had found it in the Borrego Desert, south of Indio and Palm Desert. He signed it very sincerely, yours, the man who found Peg Leg's gold. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides here. This is part of that information. That's what I just read to you. This is what Desert magazine published about this. One of the nuggets was over an ounce. The other one was just slightly less than an ounce. All right, and here's the Desert magazine cover on the left. That.
Merle, go back to that cover magazine.
Yeah.
The one on the right, you see Lake Powell?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's an aerial view of the crossing of the fathers.
Yes. Yes. I forgot to mention that, yeah.
Coincidence?
A coincidence? I think no. All right. And this was the introduction to what they were printing. And they made this map. They made this map to show people because the fellow actually told a few things. Desert magazine published a letter with a map of the Anza-Borrego area with a 30-mile wide circle on a map in November of of the area in November of 1946. The writer claimed to have found $314,650 worth of placer nuggets within that circle. Well, this really got people excited. And so they went out to find it. So hundreds and hundreds of people tried to find it. And nobody ever has found it except this one guy who claims he found it in 1955. And he waited 10 years to tell people about it. So I'll give you a little bit more information about that. Jack showed me a case full of nuggets, some as large as an ounce, that had been sent with each letter this man had sent as proof of his claim. I personally hefted them in my hands and can confirm they were gold as far as I know. And of course, Desert magazine had them assayed as such. Over time, as readers reported back their own finds, tries at finding the bonanza, this writer wrote several letters, each time sending a black nugget or a gold nugget as proof of this claim. Finally, the packages ceased coming, and they quit publishing the letters. One weekend, Roger Dean and I, my partner, decided we were going to find it. We were working for Desert Magazine. We thought we had the inside story, and we took off. So we kissed our wives goodbye and took off in his Ford van for Borrego Springs. It was a long and dusty drive into the center of the circle that Desert Magazine had printed as a guide to the area where the mysterious letter writer claimed to have gleaned $250,000 worth of placer gold. We established the camp, we followed Indian trails, we scoured the ground for 2 days and found nothing. One flat spot halfway up a trail, we discovered a perfectly square hole cut in the ground with no piles of dirt around it. I don't know what happened to the dirt, but it was a 10-foot square hole, perfectly square, and it went down about 10 feet. There was a ladder, an aluminum ladder sticking out of it. And it was very spooky. Couldn't figure out what the deal was. So I sidled my way up to it, and I looked down in there, and at the bottom was a backpack and a sleeping bag. That's all there was there. So we're looking at this, trying to figure out, why would the guy be sleeping at the bottom of the hole? How did he dig the hole, and where did the dirt go? You know, it was so cleanly done. And then all of a sudden, I heard a clink. And we were surrounded by rocks. And I heard a clink as if a bottle had been struck against rock. And my sphincter just closed like that. I could feel maybe a bead of a rifle on the back of my head. And we both put our hands up, turned around, and said, "We're leaving. We're not going to touch anything. Please don't shoot us." And we backed out of the area, and we're gone. It was the spookiest thing I think has ever happened to me in my life. He never showed himself, whoever it was. Nothing. It was nothing. And we hurried back to the van and the camp. And that night, we didn't sleep very well. We slept inside the van rather than in the tent. And I remember Roger laying beside me in that van, and he had a .22 pistol next to him. And we thought, you know, we don't know what's going on. We were really spooked. And I remember when we got home, we did some target practice with that pistol, and the pistol shot the bullet sideways. So I don't know if we could have hit anything with it. But I remember the target. I expected a circle, and it was long blood. It was a freaky thing. So that's my only prospecting story that I have. The only thing we found was next to the campfire, we found a pair of gold ring glasses. The glass had been broken out, but the frames were still there. And so that night, we stoked the fire up as hard as we could, trying to melt those glasses into a nugget so we could tell our wives that this was a valuable trip. So that's the story there. So let me see what I have missed. Is this number?
You had it.
I did. Okay. All right. So just to wrap this up, the last part of that had the entire the story that the guy had written, sent with the letter and the nuggets. But it was over 4,000 words, and I put it into the computer, and that would have been 25 minutes of reading all that stuff. So I boiled it down to these 10 points. The guy claims to have found the black nuggets in 1955 within 30 miles of the Salton Sea. He retired after the first year, and within 10 years, brought out $314,650 worth of gold. And I figured at 1965 gold spot price, it would have been 8,873 ounces of gold at $35 an ounce in 1965. At present, it would be worth $15 million. He has taken all of the surface gold, he says, that which could be found with a metal detector within 2 feet of the surface. The find was on a hill and a mound 60 miles to the west of the hill. On his first trip, he only collected 9 nuggets. One of them was 2 ounces. After he removed the black copper oxide and took them to the assayer, because he didn't want to take black nuggets to the assayer, they turned out to be 70% gold, 20% silver, and 10% copper. On his second visit, he took 720 ounces of gold out of there with a metal detector, and at that time, that was only worth $20,000. Think about that. 720 ounces at $1,695 an ounce today. That's a lot of money. He went to Nome, Alaska, where he faked placer mining and panicked to cover the find. And he sold no more than 15 ounces of it at a time. He believes there is more, but it would take serious work to find and excavate them. He's happy with his share and just wants to keep the interest up, which is why he says he divulged all of this. Borrego Springs has a sign at Borrego Springs. It's a Peg Leg Smith, California Registered Historical Landmark. It says Thomas L. Smith, better known as Peg Leg Smith, 1801, 1866, as a mountain man, prospector, and spinner of tall tales, legends regarding his lost mine have grown through the years. Countless people have searched the desert looking for its fabulous wealth. The gold mine possibly could be within a few miles of this monument, California Registered Historical Landmark 750. They have an annual liars contest, Peg Leg Smith's Liars Contest. And there's a rock pile there that anybody who has ever looked for Peg Leg's gold can throw a rock on that pile that's about 10 feet high and 50 feet wide. So there you go, there's my story.